Welcome to Whispered Empires, where ancient mysteries meet the edge of sleep. Tonight, we descend beneath the Egyptian desert to explore what satellites have begun to see but few dare to speak of. A vast metallic anomaly 40 meters long, buried under sand that remembers empires. Before we journey into the labyrinth, please consider subscribing to keep these midnight investigations alive. And if this story resonates, a gentle like or comment helps us continue mapping the forgotten corners of history. The desert holds its breath at dusk. Silence presses down like a hand on ancient stone. Somewhere beneath the sand south of Cairo, instruments detect something that should not exist. Not a tomb, not a temple, a signature 40 meters long, perfectly rectangular, metallic in nature, buried where pharaohs once walked, where Greek historians once stood in awe describing halls that stretched into darkness. In early 2025, synthetic aperture radar swept across the Hawara site with mechanical precision. The return signal came back clean and impossible. A dense, conductive mass beneath collapsed ruins and waterlogged sediment. Technicians ran the scan again, then again. The shape refused to disappear. Edges sharp as architectural plans. Dimensions stable across multiple passes. Something down there was built, not grown. Hawara sits in Egypt's Fayum Basin, a depression that was once a great lake. Ancient writers spoke of this place with reverence and fear. They described a labyrinth of 3,000 chambers, half above ground, half below. They wrote of walls lined with copper, corridors that echoed like thunder, and passages that confused even those with guides. For millennia, these accounts were dismissed as legend, exaggeration, the fevered dreams of travelers under the Egyptian sun. But modern instruments do not dream. They measure. They count photons and particles. They map density and conductivity with algorithms that have no imagination. When those instruments converge on the same impossible reading, skeptics must confront a simple truth. Something real waits beneath the sand, and it has been waiting a very long time. The 40-meter anomaly sits directly beneath the ruins of Amenemhat III's pyramid complex. The geometry above ground reads Middle Kingdom, around 1800 BCE. The geometry below does not match. It is older in its precision, stranger in its purpose. Two ages stacked in the same earth like pages from different books, bound together by nothing but proximity and sand. To understand what lies beneath Hawara, we must first understand what has been found beneath Giza. In 2017, muon tomography revealed a vast void floating above the Grand Gallery inside the Great Pyramid. 30 meters at least, a space where solid stone should exist. 3 independent detector systems confirmed the same absence. The instruments do not lie. They simply report, here rock is missing. Then, in 2023, another discovery. Behind the chevron stones on the pyramid's north face, a 9-meter corridor appeared. Long clean, sealed for millennia, cameras peered inside. The air itself felt ancient, yet the corridor exists, documented, undeniable. A fact everyone can point to, though few can explain. These are not isolated mysteries. From Hawara to Giza, from the Sphinx enclosure to subterranean shafts beneath the plateau, ground-penetrating radar and electrical resistivity tomography paint a picture of Egypt's bedrock as honeycomb. A network of voids, channels, and chambers that official narratives have not accounted for. Geometry too precise to be natural. Patterns too regular to be accidental. In the Fayum, beneath Hawara's waterlogged ground, the Mataha Expedition of 2008 deployed radar and resistivity arrays across the old lake margin. What they found was architecture. Straight lines holding for 80 meters. Right angles locked with precision. Multi-level signatures stacking at consistent depths. Corridors with repeating widths, as if someone designed them to function, not merely to exist. The data showed more than ruins. It showed intent. Rooms arranged in grids. Shafts plunging deeper than the permit allowed them to probe. Natural deposits do not keep rhythm like that. Stone does not form corridors that turn at perfect squares. Geology whispers. This pattern spoke. Within days of submitting their findings, the team's access was quietly revoked. Permits expired without renewal. Email threads went cold. Raw data transfers froze mid-file. On paper, nothing was denied. In practice, the project ended before it could truly begin. The excavation site was sealed, and the instruments packed away. Yet pieces escaped. Conference slides appeared with trimmed labels. A PDF of the site summary circulated on hobbyist forums before it disappeared from official servers. The images carried a quiet authority. Rooms like teeth in a jaw. Walkways of identical width. Not random. Not accidental. Engineered. Some whispered that what the machines drew at Hawara remains the most complete map of an unentered structure anywhere in the Nile Basin. Others dismissed it as wishful patterning laid over noise. Between those poles sits a paper labyrinth of unsigned memos and stalled permits. The architecture beneath the sand may be drowned for now, but the architecture of delay sits perfectly dry. The 40-meter signature is not an anomaly. It is a key. High conductivity suggests metal or a material that behaves like metal. A hollow perimeter with lower density within, as if the object is a shell protecting something inside. Harmonic interference patterns hint at internal chambers that resonate at specific frequencies. This is not stone. This is not limestone. This is something else. Critics argue that iron-rich nodules can form in wet ground, creating natural shapes that mimic human design. But this region's clays tend to blur edges. Natural concretions fracture cleanly, yes, but they rarely draw perfect corners and straight lengths that remain consistent across satellite passes taken months apart. The reflection here is too sharp, the geometry too insistent. Consider what the ancient writers recorded. Herodotus, in the 5th century BCE, described 12 great courts at the labyrinth site, 6 facing north and 6 facing south, all bound by one continuous wall. He spoke of 3,000 chambers when levels were combined, half above ground, half below. The priests, he wrote, kept the lower levels sealed. They claimed those chambers held records from the first time, the ancient Egyptian concept of a primordial age when gods walked and order was established. The Greek travelers were not poets seeking metaphor. They were observers documenting what they saw and what they were told. They counted steps. They measured distances. They noted materials. White limestone, dense granite, bronze fittings, walls carved with precise sequences, not random decoration. This was record-keeping, they believed, dressed as reverence. Modern scans of the Hawara site align eerily with these ancient accounts. The rectangular grid that emerges from the data matches the scale and orientation described by Herodotus. Courts arranged in pairs. Corridors threading in straight lines. Even the pyramid at the site's corner appears connected by an underground passage, exactly as the ancient text suggested. If the accounts were legend, the match should fail. If the accounts were accurate, the instruments should confirm them. They do. Not perfectly, but persistently. The overlay tightens with each new scan, as if ancient memory and modern technology are finally shaking hands across 2.5 millennia. The Egyptian concept of the duat, the underworld through which the soul journeyed after death, was not abstract. It was mapped. Texts described 12 regions, gates, thresholds, channels carrying water, chambers aligned with the stars. The language is ritualistic, yes, but the cartography feels literal. Specific counts, specific angles, wayfinding notes disguised as devotion. When modern resistivity scans trace subsurface conductivity, they find strings of anomalies with gaps like stations along an interrupted route. Where the texts describe a passage guarded by threshold markers, the scans register sharp boundaries in material properties. Where a waterway is named, moisture models trace buried channels that bend around bedrock and reappear farther on. Critics say this is pattern seeking, the human tendency to find meaning in randomness. Perhaps, but the overlays hold their shape when the datasets change. That gives the thought a longer breath than metaphor alone. It suggests that what was called myth may have been memory, encoded in story when the original language failed. The labyrinth was not merely a burial complex. It was an archive, a repository for knowledge that needed to outlast papyrus and politics. Stone was chosen because stone endures. Copper was used because copper conducts and protects. The chambers were placed below ground not to hide them, but to shield them from the surface world's inevitable chaos. Floods, invasions, fires, forgetfulness. If a civilization planned for collapse, this is what planning looks like. Not treasure hidden in darkness, but instructions sealed in geometry. Ratios cut into hall widths, sequences carved into stair counts, acoustic properties tuned to specific frequencies, maps encoded as ritual, ensuring they would be copied and recited even when their original purpose was forgotten. Across the plateau at Giza, similar logic appears. The Great Pyramid is not just mass. It is precision. Angles hit known mathematical constants. Passage heights repeat with care. Even so-called empty pockets elsewhere in the structure function as relieving spaces, small gaps designed to spread weight and preserve the core's integrity over millennia. But a cavity at least 30 meters long is not a casual design choice. It is years of labor, purpose encoded in absence. If it were simple stress relief, why is it so large? Why does it track precisely above the Grand Gallery, one of the most exact features in the entire monument? The void detected in 2017 has been confirmed by nuclear emulsion films, scintillator hodoscopes, and gas detectors. 3 different systems, 3 independent teams, and the same result: a space where solid limestone should exist. This is not artifact or error. This is measurable absence in an excess of stone. Muon tomography works by counting cosmic ray particles that pass through matter. More stone means fewer muons reach the detector. Less stone means more. By measuring the flux over time, scientists can map internal density without drilling a single hole. It is a passive, non-invasive technique borrowed from particle physics and applied to archaeology. The method is sound. The results are unsettling. Public responses to the void discovery were carefully worded. Unknown purpose. Probably natural. But this is a structure assembled block by block. Natural spaces do not form themselves inside a man-made mountain without someone leaving them there. The void exists because it was designed to exist. Then came the corridor behind the chevron stones. 9 meters long, hidden for over 4,000 years. Cameras inserted through tiny holes revealed smooth walls, precise cuts, and an empty passage leading deeper into the pyramid's mass. Access to the corridor is restricted. The footage released to the public is brief, selective. The full extent of what lies beyond remains classified. This is the pattern. Discovery followed by silence. Data appears. Officials express measured curiosity. Then the data vanishes from public servers, permits stall, and the conversation shifts to heritage protection and tourism management. The message is clear without being spoken. Some doors must remain closed. But why? If the void and the corridor are simply architectural features, why the secrecy? If Hawara's network is just drainage, why revoke access? The machinery of denial hums too loudly to ignore. Something beneath Egypt challenges the official timeline, and institutions tasked with guarding that timeline are not prepared to rewrite it. Consider the implications. If the Great Pyramid contains chambers we have not entered, then the structure holds knowledge we have not accessed. If Hawara's labyrinth exists as the ancient writers described, then our understanding of Egyptian engineering is incomplete. And if the 40-meter metallic signature beneath the sand is real, then everything we thought we knew about the capabilities of Bronze Age civilizations must be reconsidered. This is not comfortable knowledge. It upends curricula, questions authority. It demands explanation from institutions that have spent a century building consensus around a single narrative. The safest response is delay, review, further study, anything to avoid the moment when discovery forces acknowledgement. Yet the instruments will not stop seeing. Satellites continue their passes. Radar arrays grow more sensitive. Muon detectors become more precise. The technology of revelation advances faster than the bureaucracy of suppression. Eventually, the gap closes. Eventually, the doors must open. Water moves beneath the sands of Egypt like blood through veins. Groundwater channels carved into bedrock by ancient engineers, designed to flow with controlled velocity, maintaining pressure, distributing moisture to fields and temples above. These were not simple irrigation ditches. They were sophisticated hydraulic systems, graded to the millimeter, connected across vast distances. In the Grand Pyramid, instruments have recorded a natural resonance at 110 Hz. This is not random. It is the result of the chamber's dimensions, materials, and the way sound waves interact with limestone. Stand inside and you feel it more than hear it. A deep hum that presses against your ribs and settles in your chest. A frequency that seems to speak directly to bone. Malta's hypogeum, a subterranean temple carved from rock, resonates at the same frequency. So do certain chambers at Abu Simbel. So do stone-cut spaces in the Andes and Central America. Different cultures, different materials, different myths, yet the same tone. The same note tuned to the human body's natural frequencies, as if builders across the globe understood that certain pitches could alter consciousness, facilitate memory, or induce meditative states. This is not mysticism. It is physics. A chamber with the right proportions will amplify sound at specific frequencies. Moving water in a confined space creates standing waves. Those waves push the structure, which vibrates, which produces sound. The sound feeds back on the water, stabilizing the tone. It is a self-reinforcing system, an acoustic engine hidden in stone. If the underground chambers at Hawara were designed to interact with water and sound, then they were not tombs. They were instruments, machines that converted natural forces, groundwater flow, temperature gradients, Earth's subtle vibrations, into stable tones and pressures that could be harnessed, perhaps for ritual, perhaps for something more practical, perhaps for both. Some researchers whisper about ancient technologies we have forgotten. Not alien, not supernatural, simply human ingenuity applied to problems we no longer face. How do you preserve knowledge without electricity? How do you mark time without clocks? How do you communicate across generations when language changes? You use geometry, you use sound, you use stone. The 40-meter object at Hawara may function as a resonator, a capacitor, or a tuning device for a larger system. Its metallic conductivity and hollow interior suggest it was designed to interact with electromagnetic or acoustic fields. Natural formations do not exhibit these properties. Only deliberate engineering produces signatures like this. Supporters of the advanced ancient civilization hypothesis point to Hawara, Giza, and similar sites worldwide as nodes in a global network. Not physically connected, but conceptually linked. A shared knowledge system passed through trade, migration, and teaching. A common understanding of how Earth's forces could be channeled through architecture to preserve information and maintain connection with cosmic cycles. Critics counter that this is wishful thinking, humans seeing patterns where only coincidence exists. Yet the patterns do not fade under scrutiny. They sharpen. The more data collected, the more aligned the sites appear. Not identical, but harmonized. Like instruments in an orchestra, each playing its part in a composition we are only beginning to hear. The suppression of this knowledge is not a conspiracy. It is institutional inertia. Academia moves slowly. Funding follows established narratives. Publishing requires peer review from peers who were trained in frameworks that do not accommodate anomalies. A researcher who challenges the timeline risks their career. A team that reports the impossible risks their credibility. The system selects for caution, not discovery. And yet, the data leaks. Conference slides appear on forums. Satellite imagery circulates on social media. Citizen scientists cross-reference public datasets and build models more sophisticated than some official analyses. The control of information is eroding. The gates are opening. Not because institutions permit it, but because the tools of revelation are now in too many hands to contain. Consider what happens when the doors finally open. When cameras descend into the chambers beneath Hawara and find what the instruments have been seeing. Walls carved with precision. Channels still functional after millennia. Inscriptions that rewrite history. Artifacts that demonstrate capabilities we did not think possible for Bronze Age cultures. The discovery will not be quiet. It will echo. But the greater revelation may not be what is found. It may be what it forces us to reconsider. If Egypt's monuments were built by inheritors rather than originators, if the pharaohs were curators of a legacy they did not create, then the timeline of civilization collapses inward. The pyramid becomes a library, not a tomb. The labyrinth becomes a vault, not a puzzle. The entire architectural landscape becomes a message. We survived a catastrophe, and we left instructions for those who come after. Catastrophe is not metaphor. Climate records show that around 12,000 years ago, Earth's climate shifted violently. Ice sheets melted rapidly. Sea levels rose by hundreds of feet in some regions. Coastlines vanished. River valleys flooded. Populations migrated or perished. This was the Younger Dryas, a global cooling event followed by abrupt warming, possibly triggered by cosmic impacts or airbursts. Flood myths are universal. From Mesopotamia to India, from Greece to the Americas, cultures separated by oceans tell the same story. The waters rose, the old world drowned, and a few survivors rebuilt. These are not borrowings. They are echoes of the same event, remembered independently and encoded in each culture's mythology. The details differ. The core remains. If a global civilization existed before this catastrophe, not a single empire, but a network of interconnected cultures with shared knowledge, then the survivors would have faced a terrible choice. What do you save when everything is burning? What do you rebuild first? Not palaces, not temples. You build archives. You encode your understanding in forms that cannot burn, cannot be erased, cannot be misunderstood by those who find them centuries later. This is why the pyramids are aligned to stars. This is why their dimensions encode mathematical constants. This is why acoustic properties were engineered into their chambers. They are memory banks, designed to survive not just time, but ignorance. A future civilization that rediscovers them will eventually understand. These structures teach. The 40-meter anomaly at Hawara, the voids in the Great Pyramid, the labyrinthine networks beneath the Giza Plateau, these are not graves. They are lessons. And we are finally developing the instruments sensitive enough to hear what they are saying. In 2008, when the Mataha team deployed their ground-penetrating radar across Hawara, they expected to find traces of foundations, perhaps a few walls. What they found was a plan, a blueprint preserved in stone and void, a pattern so consistent it could only have been built with intent. The shapes did not scatter or blur. They aligned. Corridor widths repeated. Angles locked at 90 degrees. A geophysicist from the team, Dr. Louis Dormion, presented their findings at a quiet lecture in Belgium. The room was sparsely attended. His voice stayed calm. He explained how ground-penetrating radar works, how electrical resistivity reveals subsurface structures, how natural formations differ from engineered ones. He did not claim proof. He offered data, but the data was stunning. Multi-level signatures, shallower chambers between 8 and 12 meters, deeper structures extending beyond the reach of their instruments, right angles held across 80 meters, corridor junctions repeating with machine-like precision. And beneath it all, hints of vertical shafts plunging farther than anyone had authorization to explore. The plan was not ruins. It was a system. Within weeks of that lecture, the data disappeared from official channels. Servers went dark. Follow-up requests went unanswered. A Polish-Egyptian team attempted a limited survey in 2010, only to be told their documentation was incomplete. The project stalled. Permits expired. The researchers moved on to safer topics, careers hanging in the balance. This is how knowledge is buried in the modern age. Not with fire, but with filing systems. Not with censorship, but with process. Request denied. Under review. Further coordination required. The language is polite. The effect is absolute. A discovery that threatens the official timeline is smothered beneath procedure until interest fades and the moment passes. But the data does not fade. It is copied, shared, archived on hard drives and cloud servers around the world. Someone always saves a copy. Someone always prints a frame and pins it by the kettle. Someone always remembers what they saw before the screen went dark. And slowly, the picture reassembles in fragments, each piece confirming the next, until the denial itself becomes evidence. Atmospheric science has confirmed that muon flux is constant and predictable. These particles rain down from the upper atmosphere as cosmic rays collide with air molecules, producing showers of subatomic debris. Muons penetrate matter with ease. Lead, concrete, stone, they pass through as if the material were barely there. Only great mass can stop them. This makes muon tomography ideal for imaging dense structures. Volcanoes, reactor cores, and pyramids. By placing detectors inside a structure and counting how many muons arrive from different directions, scientists can map the density of the surrounding mass. More muons from one direction means less mass in that path. Fewer muons means more. The muon scans of the Great Pyramid were conducted over several years, using multiple detector types placed in different chambers. The result was not a guess. It was a measurement, and the measurement showed empty space where solid limestone should exist. Not a small gap, a void 30 meters long, floating above the Grand Gallery like a ghost room hidden inside the world's most measured monument. 3 independent teams verified the anomaly using different technologies. Nuclear emulsion films captured muon tracks. Scintillator hodoscopes counted particles in real time. Gas detectors provided additional confirmation. The physics is unambiguous. The void exists. What it contains, what it connects to, why it is there, those questions remain unanswered because access is denied. The same pattern repeats at Hawara. Scans detect structure. Officials express interest. Then silence. The gap between what instruments see and what authorities acknowledge grows wider. And in that gap, speculation flourishes. Not because people are irrational, but because secrecy breeds suspicion. When data is hidden, trust erodes. When questions go unanswered, imagination fills the void. This is the cost of suppression. It transforms discovery into mystery. It turns science into rumor. It hands the narrative to those willing to speculate wildly because the institutions entrusted with truth refuse to speak. The 40-meter object beneath Hawara should be investigated. The void above the Grand Gallery should be explored. The chambers mapped by radar should be opened. If they are truly empty, prove it. If they contain something, reveal it. But revelation requires courage. It demands that those in power accept the possibility that they are wrong, that their training was incomplete, that the framework they have defended is built on sand. That is a hard thing to ask. Easier to delay. Easier to review. Easier to file the data under awaiting further study and hope the moment passes. The moment is not passing. It is building. Every new scan adds weight. Every leaked image adds momentum. Every researcher who speaks out, despite the risk, adds credibility. The story is reaching critical mass. And when it breaks, when the doors finally open, the world will see what the instruments have been seeing all along. Evidence of engineering beyond what we thought possible, preserved in stone, waiting beneath the sand. Acoustic resonance is not accidental. It requires deliberate design. Chamber dimensions must align with wavelength. Materials must be chosen for their ability to reflect or absorb sound. Surfaces must be shaped to focus or diffuse vibrations. The result is a space that sings when struck, that hums when occupied, that transforms simple sound into a physical presence felt throughout the body. The Great Pyramid's King's Chamber achieves this. At 110 Hz, the fundamental resonance of the space aligns with frequencies known to induce altered states of consciousness. Not hallucinations, but shifts in awareness. A quieting of mental chatter. A sense of presence. Some call it spiritual. Others call it neurological. The effect is the same regardless of the label. Malta's hypogeum exhibits similar properties. Carved into solid rock, its chambers amplify male voices at specific pitches, creating a layered hum that fills the space with vibration. Ancient visitors would have felt this. Modern tourists feel it still. The stone remembers how to sing. This is not decoration. This is function. If the goal was to alter consciousness, to facilitate memory transfer, to create environments conducive to learning and retention, then acoustic engineering is essential. Sound affects brain waves. Specific frequencies entrain neural oscillations, shifting cognition from active analysis to receptive absorption. The ancients knew this. They built for it. Water plays a role as well. Moving water generates infrasound, frequencies below the threshold of conscious hearing but detectable by the body. These vibrations can enhance the effects of audible sound, creating layered sensory experiences that feel profound without being overwhelming. Combine flowing water with resonant chambers, and you have a system for altering perception in controlled, predictable ways. The channels beneath Hawara may function as part of this system. Water flowing through carved stone at precise gradients, generating low-frequency vibrations that interact with the chambers above. The 40-meter metallic object, if hollow, could act as a resonator, amplifying these vibrations, focusing them, storing them. Not magical, mechanical, but sophisticated beyond what we associate with ancient technology. Critics argue that attributing advanced acoustics to ancient builders is projection, modern minds imposing modern concepts on simple structures. Yet the evidence is not interpretation. It is measurement. Frequencies can be recorded. Wavelengths can be calculated. Material properties can be tested. The chambers were designed to resonate. The design works. That is not opinion. That is physics. If Hawara's labyrinth was built as an acoustic archive, then the knowledge stored there was not written on papyrus. It was encoded in frequency, certain tones unlocking certain memories, certain vibrations activating certain states of consciousness. The chambers themselves would function as the interface, and those initiated into their use would access information not by reading, but by experiencing. This is a radically different model of knowledge preservation. Not external and symbolic, but internal and experiential. Not text to be read, but spaces to be entered. The labyrinth becomes a living library, its passages tuned to teach, its chambers designed to transform those who walk through them. And if this model seems far-fetched, consider that oral traditions worldwide use rhythm, chant, and repetition to encode vast amounts of information without writing. The labyrinth is simply an architectural extension of the same principle. The implications are staggering. If the ancient Egyptians, or those who came before them, understood how to use sound and space to preserve knowledge, then much of what we call mythology may be instruction manuals. The do-it, the underworld journey of the soul, may describe the physical experience of navigating the labyrinth. The gates, the guardians, the trials, all literal descriptions of what one encounters when moving through resonant chambers designed to test and teach. This reframes everything. The pyramids are not monuments to ego. They are instruments of transformation. The labyrinth is not a maze. It is a curriculum. The inscriptions are not prayers. They are operating instructions. And the 40-meter object beneath Hawara may be the keystone, the central device around which the entire system was organized. The suppression begins to make sense. If this interpretation is correct, then the monuments hold practical, applicable knowledge. Techniques for altering consciousness. Methods for preserving information across millennia. Principles of acoustics and hydrology that could be reverse-engineered and applied today. That knowledge has value, and value attracts control. Tourism depends on mystery, not answers. Heritage agencies manage narrative, not revelation. Political interests align with stability, not upheaval. If the doors open and the chambers reveal what the instruments suggest, then the story changes. Egypt's monuments become active technology, not passive history. And technology, unlike legend, can be owned, patented, controlled. This is why the data disappears, why permits stall, why researchers are quietly discouraged. Not because the establishment fears the unknown, but because it fears the known. Revelation threatens control, and control, once established, resists dissolution. The ground may hold wonders, but the surface holds power, and power rarely volunteers to share. Yet the instruments continue their work. Radar pulses sweep beneath the sand. Muons fall through stone. Satellites map conductivity from orbit. The technology of revelation grows more precise each year, more accessible, more distributed. Suppression becomes harder. The gates are opening, not because institutions permit it, but because they no longer have the strength to hold them closed. Global alignments suggest that Hawara and Giza are not isolated. Similar structures appear across the planet, separated by oceans but united by geometry. Teotihuacan in Mexico, Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, Sacsayhuaman in Peru. Yanaguni off Japan. Each site exhibits precision stonework, astronomical alignments, and acoustic properties that mirror those found in Egypt. Coincidence becomes less credible with each new comparison. The ratios repeat, the angles align, the frequencies match. If these sites were built independently, they should vary widely in approach and execution. Instead, they exhibit a shared vocabulary of form and function. Supporters of diffusionism argue this indicates contact, trade, or migration of knowledge. Critics counter that similar problems produce similar solutions. Both may be true, but the precision is what haunts. At Sacsayhuaman, massive stones interlock with polygonal faces so tight that a knife blade cannot slip between them. No mortar, no chipping, just stone meeting stone with a perfection that modern masons struggle to replicate. This is not accident. This is mastery, and mastery implies practice, refinement, time. More time than the official chronology allows. Göbekli Tepe, dated to 9600 BCE, predates pottery, writing, and agriculture. Yet its carved pillars display artistry and organization that suggest a society far more complex than hunter-gatherers scratching symbols on cave walls. The site was deliberately buried around 8000 BCE, the stones covered with soil, the effort enormous. Why? To preserve it, to hide it, to ensure it survived whatever was coming. The Younger Dryas event aligns with this timeline. A global catastrophe around 10,800 BCE, followed by abrupt warming around 9,600 BCE. Göbekli Tepe emerges during the recovery period, then is sealed as if in anticipation of further trouble. The chronology fits. The archaeology confirms it. Yet the implications are ignored because they disrupt the narrative of linear progress. If civilization did not begin with Sumer, if advanced cultures existed before the flood, then human history is not a ladder but a spiral. Periods of advancement followed by collapse. Knowledge preserved by those who survive, encoded in stone and myth, waiting for future generations to rediscover. This is not New Age speculation. This is pattern recognition applied to global data. The 40-meter object at Hawara sits within this larger context. It is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a network, a system of sites connected by purpose, if not by direct contact. Each node preserving a fragment of knowledge, each structure designed to teach, each alignment encoding information that transcends language and survives catastrophe. The metallic signature suggests technology. The hollow interior suggests storage. The harmonic response suggests function. Taken together, the evidence points to a device. Not mystical, not alien, human, but sophisticated. A tool built by people who understood forces we have only recently begun to measure, and buried deep enough to survive the floods, the wars, the shifting sands of empire and time. If this device is opened and found to contain inscriptions, artifacts, or mechanisms that demonstrate capabilities inconsistent with Bronze Age technology, the timeline collapses. If it contains nothing, the question remains, why build it? Why shape metal with such precision and bury it beneath a labyrinth described by historians 25 centuries ago? The answers wait in the dark, and the dark is not silent. It hums. If this device is opened and found to contain inscriptions, artifacts, or mechanisms that demonstrate capabilities inconsistent with Bronze Age technology, the timeline collapses. If it contains nothing, the question remains, why build it? Why shape metal with such precision and bury it beneath a labyrinth described by historians 25 centuries ago? The answers wait in the dark, and the dark is not silent. It hums. The library was not just a collection of scrolls. It was a network of knowledge connected to older repositories across Egypt. Temple complexes held their own archives. Priestly schools maintained oral traditions. And beneath certain sites, vaults carved into bedrock preserved the most crucial information in forms that required no translation. Geometry, frequency, alignment, universal languages that speak to anyone with instruments sensitive enough to listen. When Alexandria burned, the world lost breadth. But depth may have survived. The texts that describe lost wonders, Heron's steam engines, Eratosthenes' measurement of Earth's circumference, Manethos' complete king lists reaching back tens of thousands of years. These were summaries. The full knowledge, the practical manuals, the step-by-step instructions may have been stored elsewhere, underground, in stone, waiting. The suppression of this possibility is not malicious. It is bureaucratic. Institutions tasked with preserving history are conservative by design. Change is slow. Consensus is required. Evidence must be overwhelming before old models are abandoned. But the threshold for overwhelming is subjective. And when careers, funding, and prestige are tied to existing narratives, that threshold rises exponentially. Researchers who pursue anomalies risk marginalization. Journals reject papers that challenge consensus. Conferences decline abstracts that stray too far from accepted frameworks. The penalty for deviation is not punishment, but irrelevance. And in academia, irrelevance is death. So most stay within the lines. They pursue safe questions. They publish safe answers. They build careers on foundations of sand, knowing that questioning the foundation means falling through. Yet some refuse to stay silent. They circulate data on forums. They present at independent symposia. They publish in open-access journals beyond the reach of traditional gatekeepers. These are not cranks. They are credentialed scientists and engineers, risking their reputations because the data demands acknowledgement. And their work accumulates, piece by piece, scan by scan, until denial requires more effort than acceptance. The 40-meter signature at Hawara is one such piece. The void in the Great Pyramid is another. The labyrinthine networks beneath Giza are a third. Each is defensible on its own. Each can be explained away with enough effort. But together they form a coherent picture. And that picture is not of tombs and temples. It is of infrastructure. Systems designed to function, to preserve, to teach. And systems require maintenance, which means they were built to be accessed. Access is the key. If the chambers can be entered, they can be studied. If they can be studied, their purpose can be understood. And if their purpose is understood, the narrative shifts. Egypt's monuments become active sites, not passive ruins. The past becomes present. And the questions we ask about who built what and when and why receive answers that textbooks are not prepared to accommodate. But access requires permission, and permission requires politics. The Supreme Council of Antiquities controls every excavation, every survey, every camera that enters a protected site. Their authority is absolute. Their process is opaque. Requests for access can take years, or they can be denied outright with no explanation beyond further review required. The power to delay is the power to prevent. Tourism complicates matters. Egypt's monuments generate billions in revenue. The narrative sold to tourists is simple, heroic, and ancient. Pharaohs built pyramids as tombs, using copper tools and wooden sledges. Changing that narrative risks confusion, skepticism, and lost revenue. Admitting that the monuments may contain undiscovered chambers, or that their purpose is not fully understood, introduces uncertainty. And uncertainty is bad for business. So the official position remains fixed. No significant discoveries, routine maintenance, heritage preservation. The language is reassuring. The reality is stagnation. And beneath the surface, the instruments continue to see what they see, indifferent to policy, unswayed by narrative, patient as stone. The satellite passes will continue. The radar sweeps will continue. The muon counts will continue. Technology does not tire. It does not bow to pressure. It simply measures, records, and reports. And as the data accumulates, the gap between what is known and what is acknowledged will narrow. Eventually, it will close. Eventually, the doors will open. When they do, the world will see what has been hidden. Not by conspiracy, but by caution. Not by malice, but by inertia. The chambers beneath Hawara and Giza will be entered. The 40-meter object will be examined. The inscriptions, if they exist, will be read. And the story of human civilization will be rewritten, not because we discovered something new, but because we finally acknowledged what we have been seeing all along. The timeline of suppression is telling. In In 2008, the Mataha Expedition mapped subsurface structures at Hawara. By 2009, their access was revoked. In 2010, a follow-up team was denied permits. In 2017, the Great Pyramid Void was announced with great fanfare. By 2018, requests for further investigation were stalled. In 2023, the corridor was revealed. By 2024, access was restricted. The pattern is consistent. Discovery, excitement, then silence. Critics attribute this to standard academic process. Data must be verified. Methods must be peer-reviewed. Excavation requires planning. These are reasonable points, but they do not explain why data disappears from public servers. They do not explain why permits are revoked without explanation. They do not explain why researchers are quietly discouraged from pursuing certain lines of inquiry. Reasonable process does not require secrecy. The more plausible explanation is that the discoveries threaten established interests. Heritage agencies, academic departments, and political entities all benefit from narrative stability. Tourists visit Egypt expecting to see tombs. Students learn timelines anchored to specific dates. Governments manage cultural heritage as national pride. If the monuments turn out to be older, stranger, or more sophisticated than advertised, those anchors dissolve. Dissolution creates opportunity. New theories emerge. New researchers gain prominence. New technologies are validated. But it also creates risk. Careers built on old models crumble. Institutions lose credibility. Authority is questioned. And in a world where authority is fragile, any threat to legitimacy is treated as existential. The response is not evil. It is self-preservation. But the effect is the same. Knowledge is buried. Yet the burial is incomplete. Too many eyes are watching. Too many instruments are scanning. Too many citizens are cross-referencing data. The control of information that once resided in a few universities and museums has fractured. Anyone with internet access can download satellite imagery, overlay scans, run simulations, and share results. Peer review now happens in real time, across forums and comment threads, beyond the reach of traditional gatekeepers. This is both liberating and chaotic. Signal competes with noise. Insight mixes with speculation. But over time, patterns emerge. The crowd filters what institutions ignore. And when the crowd converges on the same conclusions, chambers beneath Hawara, voids in the Great Pyramid, metallic anomalies in the sand, then dismissal becomes harder. The narrative shifts not because authority permits it, but because the public demands it. The instruments do not care about permission. Muons fall whether officials approve or not. Radar pulses penetrate regardless of policy. The ground holds its secrets, yes, but it also reflects, resonates, and responds to those who ask the right questions. And the questions are being asked now, with increasing sophistication, by people who will not accept silence as an answer. The cost of continued suppression is credibility. Each leaked image, each denied request, each unexplained silence erodes trust. Institutions that once commanded automatic respect must now justify their decisions. And when justification is not forthcoming, suspicion fills the void. The establishment, in trying to protect its narrative, is undermining its authority. The irony is stark. Meanwhile, the ground waits. The chambers wait. The 40-meter object waits. Patience is the defining characteristic of stone. It does not hurry. It does not fade. It simply endures, holding its shape across millennia, indifferent to the politics of revelation. Eventually, someone will descend. Eventually, the data will become evidence. Eventually, the story will be told. What will that story reveal? Perhaps a device. Perhaps inscriptions. Perhaps evidence of engineering that forces us to reconsider what Bronze Age humans were capable of. Or perhaps something simpler. Proof that the ancients understood forces we are only now rediscovering. Acoustics, hydrology, resonance. The conversion of natural phenomena into stable, predictable effects. Not magic, science, but science encoded in stone, preserved in geometry, waiting for minds prepared to understand. The journey through this mystery has been long. From satellite imagery to muon tomography, from ancient texts to modern scans, the evidence accumulates. Each data point, each reading, each leaked image adds weight to the possibility that beneath Egypt's sands lies more than history. There lies knowledge, active, applicable, preserved, and the 40-meter object at Hawara may be the key to accessing it. The metallic signature is not random. The hollow interior is not accidental. The harmonic response is not geological. Every property measured by instruments points to deliberate design, and design implies purpose. The purpose may be beyond our current understanding, but it is not beyond investigation. If we are willing to look, if we are brave enough to ask, if we can overcome the institutional inertia that prefers comfortable ignorance to uncomfortable truth, the suppression will not last. Cannot. The forces aligned against secrecy are too strong. Technological progress, public curiosity, academic competition, and the simple fact that truth has momentum. Once a certain mass of evidence is reached, denial collapses under its own weight. We are approaching that mass. The balance is shifting. The doors are beginning to open. When they do, the revelation will be profound. Not because it will answer every question, but because it will force us to ask new ones. About our past, about our capabilities, about what we have forgotten and what we might still learn from those who came before. The ancients were not primitive. They were sophisticated, and they left messages for us, encoded in stone, waiting to be read. The labyrinth beneath Hawara is one such message. The void in the Great Pyramid is another. The chambers mapped by radar, the channels carved into bedrock, the acoustic properties engineered into stone. These are not decoration. They are communication, a language that transcends words, written in geometry and frequency, preserved in materials that outlast empires and ideologies. And we are finally learning to read it. The reading has only just begun. Each scan reveals new layers. Each measurement adds precision. Each leaked dataset corrects the official narrative by increments. The process is slow, frustrating, opposed at every turn. But it is unstoppable, because the ground does not lie. It simply exists, holding its secrets until the right questions are asked by minds prepared to hear the answers. Those answers will challenge us. They will demand that we reconsider assumptions about linear progress, about the capabilities of ancient peoples, about what is possible without modern technology. They will force humility upon a civilization that prides itself on advancement. And they will offer a gift, the knowledge that if collapse comes as it has before, recovery is possible, because it has happened before, and the evidence of that recovery is waiting beneath the sand. This is not just archaeology. It is philosophy. It is a meditation on time, knowledge, and the resilience of human ingenuity. It asks, what do we preserve when everything falls? And how do we ensure that what we preserve can be found, understood, and used by those who come after? The ancients faced these questions. Their answers are carved into stone, buried under sand, sealed in chambers that have not seen light in millennia. And we are on the verge of opening those chambers. The journey inward mirrors the journey downward. As we descend through layers of sand and stone, we also descend through layers of assumption and narrative. Each layer removed reveals something older, stranger, more sophisticated than what we were taught to expect. And at the deepest layer, we find not simplicity, but complexity. Not primitiveness, but mastery. Not the beginning of civilization, but a continuation. Continuation implies predecessors. If the pyramids and labyrinths were built by inheritors, then who were the originators? Where did they come from? What did they know? And why did their knowledge fade? These are the questions that make institutions uncomfortable, because they lead to timelines that do not fit textbooks, to possibilities that demand rewriting history, to truths that challenge authority. But the questions persist. They cannot be suppressed indefinitely. The instruments see what they see. The data accumulates. The patterns emerge. And the public, armed with access to information that was once controlled by gatekeepers, is learning to read the signs. The 40-meter object at Hawara is not just a curiosity. It is a symbol of what lies beneath, of what we have ignored, of what is finally being acknowledged. The acknowledgement will come slowly, first in whispers, then in papers, then in textbooks. The process may take decades, but it will happen, because truth once seen cannot be unseen. And the instruments have seen. The scans are clear. The evidence is mounting. The only question now is whether we have the courage to look at what the ground is showing us, and the humility to accept that our ancestors may have known things we are only beginning to remember. Imagine the moment when cameras finally descend into the chambers beneath Hawara. The air, undisturbed for thousands of years, stirs as light enters. Walls carved with precision reflect the beam. Channels cut into stone still hold the shape of water that once flowed. And at the center, the 40-meter object waits, its metallic surface dulled by time but intact, its purpose encoded in form, ready to be understood. What will that understanding bring? Perhaps new technologies, perhaps new philosophies, perhaps simply a deeper respect for those who came before. But whatever it brings, it will be transformative, because it will prove that we are not the first to reach for the stars, to encode knowledge in lasting forms, to build structures that speak across millennia. We are inheritors, and what we inherit we must learn to use. The labyrinth is not a maze. It is a library. The pyramid is not a tomb. It is an instrument. The monuments are not ego. They are archive. This reframing changes everything. It transforms Egypt's landscape from a cemetery of pharaohs to a repository of knowledge. And it invites us to ask, what else is buried? What else have we overlooked? What else is waiting beneath the sand, under the ice, beneath the sea? The global network of aligned sites suggests that Hawara is not unique. Similar structures may exist elsewhere, their signatures hidden until instruments sensitive enough to detect them sweep the ground. And as those instruments improve, as satellites become more precise, as muon detectors proliferate, the map will fill in. Nodes will appear, connections will emerge, and the network will reveal itself as what it always was. A system designed to preserve knowledge through catastrophe. Catastrophe is not speculative. It is historical. The Younger Dryas event is documented in ice cores, sediment layers, and flood myths worldwide. Something happened around 12,000 years ago that forced humanity to rebuild. And those who rebuilt did so with purpose. They encoded their knowledge in forms that could not be destroyed. They aligned their structures to the stars, ensuring that future generations could recalibrate timelines and understand cycles. They built for eternity. We are the future generations they built for. We are the ones with instruments sensitive enough to read what they wrote. We are the inheritors of their legacy, and our responsibility is not to worship them, but to learn from them, to understand what they understood, to preserve what they preserved, and to ensure that when the next catastrophe comes, as it inevitably will, the knowledge survives. This is the true purpose of the labyrinth beneath Hawara. Not to hide treasure, but to safeguard wisdom. Not to bury the dead, but to keep the living informed. The chambers were designed to be found, but only by those ready to understand. And the 40-meter object at its heart may be the key, the device that unlocks the system, the teacher that reveals the lesson. If we are ready, if we are willing, if we can silence the noise long enough to listen. Listening requires patience, the kind of patience stone has, the kind that measures time in millennia, not minutes. The ground does not hurry, it waits, and it teaches those who wait with it that revelation is not an event, but a process, a gradual unfolding of understanding that comes from sustained attention, careful measurement, and the humility to accept that we do not know everything. The institutions that suppress this knowledge do so not from malice, but from fear. Fear that admitting error will undermine authority. Fear that changing the narrative will confuse the public. Fear that opening the doors will unleash forces they cannot control. These fears are not irrational, but they are obstacles, and obstacles eventually must be overcome. Overcoming them requires collective will. Researchers must continue to pursue anomalies despite career risks. Journalists must continue to report findings despite editorial pressure. Citizens must continue to demand transparency despite institutional resistance. The process is slow. The opposition is entrenched. But the momentum is building. And momentum, once established, is difficult to stop. The 40-meter signature beneath Hawara is a focal point, a rallying cry for those who believe the ground holds more than we have been told, a symbol of what is possible when instruments are trusted over narratives, and a reminder that the past is not dead. It is speaking. We need only learn its language. That language is geometry. It is frequency. It is alignment. It is the careful placement of stone to capture sound, to channel water, to mark time. It is a language that transcends culture and survives catastrophe. And it is written in forms we are only now learning to read, with instruments that would have seemed magical to those who built the structures we are studying. But they would not have seen our instruments as magic. They would have recognized them as tools, more precise perhaps than what they had, but fundamentally the same in purpose, to measure, to understand, to preserve. The continuity is profound. We are using technology they would have admired to rediscover knowledge they encoded. We are their students, millennia late, finally arriving at the lesson they prepared. The lesson is simple. Civilizations fall, but knowledge can endure. If you build it into stone, if you encode it in geometry, if you align it with the stars, if you hide it deep enough to survive floods, fires, and the shifting sands of time, then when the inheritors come, when we come, they will find it, and they will learn, and the cycle will continue. This is not fantasy. This is pattern recognition applied to global data. The alignments are real. The acoustic properties are measurable. The voids are confirmed by multiple independent systems. The 40-meter signature is consistent across scans. The suppression is documented. And the revelation is inevitable. When it comes, it will not arrive with trumpets. It will arrive quietly as data always does. A press release, a journal article, a documentary, and then, slowly, the narrative will shift. Textbooks will be revised. Timelines will be extended. Capabilities will be reassessed. And humanity will understand, perhaps for the first time, that we are not the pinnacle of civilization. We are a chapter in a much longer story. That story is written in stone. And stone does not lie. It endures, preserves, teaches, and when we are ready to learn, it reveals what it has been holding. Patiently, silently, waiting for instruments sensitive enough to hear its voice. Those instruments are here now. The voice is being heard, and the story is beginning to emerge from the darkness. The labyrinth beneath Hawara is calling. The void in the Great Pyramid is waiting. The 40-meter object pulses with promise. And the ground, patient as ever, holds its breath. Not in anticipation, but in certainty. Because stone knows what we are only learning. That time is long, that knowledge is precious, and that those who build for eternity will eventually be heard. We are hearing them now, faintly at first, through the noise of skepticism and the static of suppression. But the signal is growing stronger. Each scan clarifies it. Each leaked dataset amplifies it. Each researcher who speaks out adds their voice to the chorus. And the chorus is singing a truth that cannot be ignored. Beneath the sand, beneath the stone, beneath the narratives we have built, lies knowledge waiting to be reclaimed. Reclamation is not excavation. It is recognition. It is the acknowledgement that what lies beneath is not just artifact, but archive. Not just structure, but system. Not just monument, but message. And that message, preserved across millennia in forms that cannot burn, cannot be erased, cannot be misunderstood by those with the tools to read it, is finally being received. The reception will transform us. Not overnight, but gradually. As we learn what the ancients knew. As we rediscover techniques we thought were lost. As we understand that our timeline is not a ladder, but a spiral. Rising and falling. Advancing and collapsing. But always continuing. Because knowledge, once encoded in stone, becomes immortal. And immortality is patient. So we wait with the stone. We listen with the instruments. We ask questions that institutions fear and seek answers the ground is ready to provide. We descend, not into darkness, but into understanding. And at the bottom of that descent, we will find not the end of history, but its continuation. Encoded, preserved, waiting, just as it was always meant to be. Close your eyes. The 40-meter object is still there, buried beneath the sand, its metallic surface reflecting nothing in the darkness. You are standing at the edge of the Fayum Basin, where the ancient lake once breathed and the labyrinth once opened its 1,000 doors. But you are also here, in your room, in your bed, in the gentle darkness that welcomes sleep. The satellites continue their silent passes overhead. The muons fall through stone like patient rain. The ground holds what it has always held, indifferent to our urgency, waiting with the patience that only stone knows. Somewhere beneath Egypt, corridors echo with frequencies we cannot yet hear, and chambers preserve knowledge we are only beginning to remember. The instruments see, the data accumulates, and the story, ancient as it is, continues to unfold. If you enjoyed this journey into the hidden architecture of the past, please consider subscribing to Whispered Empires, and leave a like to help others find these midnight mysteries. Rest now. The labyrinth will still be there when you wake. And perhaps, in your dreams, you will walk its halls and hear what the stones have been saying all along.